All right, guys. So those of you guys who don't know, I just want to introduce a mentor of mine, someone I look up to as the role model, Dave Brixius. Very successful in the field, somebody who knows his stuff and knows what he's talking about. And he understands the way the body needs to move in order for it to be so successful. He's helped plenty of athletes reach high levels of elite competition, as you heard him speak earlier about competition, how it drives, you know, us and how it drives what we know and what we're intending to do with the education that we're getting. So please with a warm welcome, Dave Brixius. So Dave, the first question I have for you, and we discussed this earlier, who is Dave Brixius?
Well, first of all, let me thank you guys. I appreciate you guys actually having me on. It's an honor and a blessing to be here. So I appreciate you, Jermichael. Like I said, it goes way back. And then when you started talking to me, a couple of years ago about, you getting into this field, I'm like, man, that's awesome. You know what I mean? I remember back in our Hershey days when you were training with me and stuff. So it's an honor to be here. Who is Dave Brixius? Dave's just a normal guy that has a passion for understanding how to make people better. And it's not just in athletics, not just with the physical aspect of it, that a lot of people can do. It's taking, and understanding all realms of everybody, from the spiritual, the mental, those kind of aspects as well, trying to build people up to where they need to be. We live in a negative society, constant negativity, whether it's on the news, whether you hear it, boom, boom, boom. And it's just taking that aspect, a whole different aspect of saying, hey, listen, we can be great. We got to work for it, but we all can be great at something. You just got to figure out what that something is. And I'm just blessed because, I found my passion. I worked in physical therapy when I first got out of school, which was great, fun, taught me a lot, but it wasn't me. It was not me. That kind of stuff just wasn't, how they looked at the human body is a little different than how I look at it. And so understanding that, it gave me a lot of good basis of what I do with a lot of my athletes, but it was then time to evolve and move into something different. So that's pretty much the realm of Dave Brixius, just trying to help the individual, the athlete, the client, just gain a confidence in themselves that they have, but maybe just isn't brought out. Maybe it's been knocked down, or maybe they didn't even know they have it. So it's trying to bring out, I always talk about that greatness. You're always trying to unleash that greatness. And that's what I try to do with all the athletes or whoever I come in contact with, just trying to make them better people.
Really unleashing that potential, right?
Yo, man, unleash that potential. You got it.
That is a term Dave has coined.
For a long
Something that
time.
really, a long time, something that has really driven, what people come to understand what it means the second you step into EXSP performance. It's a mentality. You know what I mean? Dave. I talk about your facility all the time. Because it's, to me, it's, people think you need all the glitz and the glamour when it comes to this, but no, honestly, all you need is the barn. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think that's a key point. I think we've gotten so technology heavy based, which I'm not against the technology. I think parts of it are great, but I think the machinery has become so overwhelming in this industry. Why it's nice, the majority of that stuff you don't even need. I'll be honest with you. The nicest machine I have, which I love, and probably the only one I wouldn't go without, is a Pit Shark squat. That's it. A belt squat. I love it. I could go without it, but I really like that one. It's one of my favorite ones. Besides that, all I got is dumbbells, bars, and racks. And I tell everybody the greatest machine you got is sitting in front of that mirror. Even though we don't have mirrors in the gym, but it's the person you look at every day. That's the greatest machine. So if you can figure out how to get that machine to work properly and efficiently, there's no telling how great you can be. I've seen athletes that, when they first came in, could barely even walk and chew gum at the same time, and through their hard work and dedication, got themselves a full scholarship, play. The one girl I know won 3 state titles and 3 district titles when she was in high school, got herself a full scholarship to play soccer out of school. And I'll never forget her coming in the first day. I think she tripped over her own feet, so those are the kind of things that you take and have to look at and then build upon. And like I said, if you can understand how the human body works, you can do some magical stuff with it. It's honestly the most amazing thing that sits out there. And it's the most complicated thing. It's simple, but it's complicated. We make it more complicated than what it is, but to get the body to understand how to actually do things properly. You just have to understand how everything works together. And I think one of the problems in the strength and conditioning field right now is we isolate too much. We're isolations, um, all right, we got to do this exercise because it's going to work with this muscle group. And I don't think we look at the human movement of it. And sometimes I think what we're doing to athletes, and the more I study, especially in the last year and a half, I think we're doing more damage sometimes than good. And it's just something to think about as you move forward. It took me, I've been in this 19, 20 years now. It took me a good 18 years to start to understand how everything started to put together. We didn't have all these Zooms. We didn't have all this technology stuff. When I wanted to do stuff, I drove, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes to a conference to hear somebody speak. Got back in the car and drove home that night, or slept in my car, for the next day and stuff. As a college student, you don't have any money. So those kind of things. So the technology you guys have and the ability to get online or do these kind of things or ask questions is unfounded. When I hear that people don't ask questions and things like that, it just blows my mind. I'm like, dude, I would have loved to have the stuff that you guys have, because just gaining another person's perspective, I think is one of the keys. And you shouldn't believe everything you hear out of my voice. I think you should go and actually research it and say, do you agree with that? And you shouldn't hear everything, out of this other person. You got to take it all in and then do your own research and come up with your own opinion. Okay, is this best for this client? Is this best for me? Is this best for whoever? Because my philosophy, or I shouldn't say even philosophy because I'm not a philosopher, but my theory on how I train athletes and do things has changed dramatically. I used to be like, hey, lift all the heaviest weights in the world and you get better. But that's not always true. Some athletes can't do that, and you got to be able to mold what you're doing into what you do. And I'm in a different situation. I'm in the private sector. I'm not in a huge, college setting or NFL setting or anything like that. So I don't have, 60 kids at one time. But that's the one thing I do like about it, is that I can tailor the programs how I see fit for each individual. And I think that's one of the big takeaways I think you guys got to understand as you're getting into this field. See if you really like it. Like I said, I went to therapy first, enjoyed it, but didn't love it. Once I got into the sports performance realm of it, dude, I love it. Actually love everything about it. I love the kids. I love the work. I love the research you can do. And I tell everybody, I don't work a day in my life. Not a day in my life do I work. I wake up and I love what I do. So I can't really say it's like a job. It's more or less a hobby that I get paid for. So I can't complain.
May I ask, what was it about physical therapy that you didn't love enough to stay and keep doing that?
The physical therapy part, it got to where it became like, at least when I was in it, I don't know if it's transformed back, but it got to a point. I understand, listen, everybody's in the business to make money. And I understand you got to bill for certain things, but it came to a point where we were just getting as many people in as possible. And I didn't think the quality of care was what it needed to be. And to me, that just isn't right. Like, if you're not going to help a person figure out what's wrong, then what are we doing? And this is what I learned really over this whole time. Say you come into me with a knee issue. Is it really your knee that's the problem? Or is it someplace else? So I had a gentleman come in tonight, and a prime example was, he came in, he said, I went and got an MRI on my knee. I said, okay. So where are you having the pain? So he showed me medial aspect of the knee around the MCL, could be meniscus, older guy, 57. I said, okay, let's take a look. Well, guess what? When we started doing stuff on his quad and actually into his hip and his psoas muscle, guess what he got relief in? The knee pain. So it really wasn't the knee that's causing it. The pain was there, but we were finding out where the other issues were. And it's just, sometimes it's not always easy. Sometimes it's more difficult. But I think therapy sometimes got to a point, at least when I was in it, it was like, hey, you have knee pain, we're treating your knee. So we get you better, you make you feel better. And then all of a sudden, they're back in 2 months because we never fixed the problem. We just I always talk about, we just put a Band-Aid on. So we put Band-Aids on people, got them better, they left, and then 2 months later, they're back, with the pain. And then they come back in and you do the same thing over. And, we were seeing, but right before I left, probably, I think there was 3 PTs. We were seeing on average per day, like 75 patients. So think about that in an 8-9 hour period. That's a lot of people. That's 25, 30, that's 25 patients probably per therapist. That's a lot in an 8-hour period, getting the quality of care that you need. So I just felt that wasn't the realm I wanted to go into. Plus I wanted to do stuff so these people wouldn't be in pain. So they wouldn't need to come to this. They could actually take care of their body, understand their body, so they could actually deal with it. Now, I understand if you tear something, you rip something up, you break something, 100%. Therapy is great for that. But if you just have pain, just to have pain, like a 50-year-old shouldn't walk around and say, my knee hurts. Well, why does your knee hurt? There's got to be a reason why you're doing something and what's causing that pain. So that's pretty much the reason why I got out of it. I just thought there was a better ways of doing things and helping people out to mitigate that before it got to that point.
Do you also feel like there's a huge disconnect between physical therapy and strength and conditioning? Because I've also had experience in physical therapy, and I've actually asked a physical therapist at one point, like, would you refer your client or your patient to a strength and conditioning professional? And they were hesitant to say yes because they kind of like had the belief that they weren't as qualified because they haven't gone through the same education that they did. So they were reluctant to say, like, well, I would refer them to an athletic trainer, but we don't really have those options. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, and you'll find a few out there, you know, that maybe have CSCSs, you know, that have that knowledge and actually understand what goes on. But I 100% agree with you. I think there's a huge disconnect in this industry from the top chain on down, from the doctors to the therapists to the athletic trainers to the sports performance strength coaches. I think there's a huge disconnect, and it's causing an issue. There's bottlenecks all going along throughout this whole process where athletes aren't getting back the way they should. You know, an athlete who comes back from an ACL tear, maybe doesn't get the training that they need, the understanding, you know, goes to therapy. Therapy gets them back after 3 months. You know, now insurance only pays for whatever 3 months, and then you got to pay out the wazoo. When I was in it 19 years ago, hell, we used to keep an ACL patient 9-10 months, you know, if not a year, to get them all the way back. So you got 3-4 months, and then, like you said, the therapists are hesitant to pass them on, you know, to pass them on to the strength and conditioning. Oh, because they don't have, you know, 6 years into this, like a doctor, you know, physical therapy. They don't have 6 years into it. So what do they know? And I think that's a huge problem. There's a disconnect. And I think it's a communication problem more so than a knowledge problem. You know, I think everybody has their different ideas, which is great. I think everybody should. But I think the communication is where the breakdown occurs. You know, there's too many egos in every industry. And this goes from, you know, all the way up, all the way down. And if we don't channel that ego, it's okay to think that you're great. It's okay to think that, hey, listen, I have these answers, but you have to listen to the other person and actually fill them in, because it's not about me. It's not about the therapist. It's not about the doctor. It's about that client. And that's what everybody forgets. So the chain gets broken because people's egos get in the way of it. And I think if we could get by that point, we could do better off. Now I'm working with the group right now, from doctors to therapists down to myself, to bridge that gap. And actually we're in the phases of it, one of the final phases of it, actually putting everything together to make that better. But they got to have confidence in me as well as I got to have confidence in them. Am I going to disagree with them on certain things? No question. I mean, every individual is going to have disagreements somewhere along the line. It's whether we can come to the agreement what's best for that individual. And if we can do that, the industry could be phenomenal. Actually, we could get people back and keep them healthy much longer, and hopefully get them off medication, get them back from, you know, rehab, and hopefully never see the doc again. I understand the doc might be a little pissed because, you know, that's some of their money coming in. But at the end of the day, we got to look at the clientele. And I think that's the key to making this whole thing work. So that's a great question. I 100% agree that there's a bottleneck and it needs to be fixed. If not, we're only going to continue to bang our heads and wonder why these kids continue to get injured at an alarming rate.
Dave, I have a question for you. So you spoke on it a little bit about feeling the need to help, you know, help people be the better versions of themselves, be the healthier versions of themselves. What most importantly drove you to start EXSP? What was your driving point to, hey, this is what I want to do after your experience with physical therapy?
Yeah, the driving force behind the whole thing was seeing athletes come in. And this was just around the time, like you're talking about 19, 20 years ago, when the ACLs really started to take off with injuries, you know, where it started to get younger and younger. And I never forget working with a girls soccer player. She was probably, I'm going to say 17 years old at the time. And that was young. Trust me, that was very young for an athlete to tear their ACL. And I remember the pain and discomfort she was in, and not just physically, but emotionally. She was beat emotionally. It wasn't that physically she couldn't get back and play, psychologically she was gone. She still had 2 years of eligibility left in college, but psychologically she was gone. And it tugged at me because I'm like, dude, wonder what would happen if that would have been me. Do you know what I mean? I put myself in her situation and said, what if that would have been me? Would I want to come back? Because I mean, it's a devastating injury. And why most people come back physically, mentally is where I think they struggle. And seeing that, and then seeing other clientels her age, come in with hamstring issues and then not getting back, or ankle issues, and then seeing these things. And then you're like, man, there's got to be something better out there than these kids getting hurt. And, now you hear kids, I think as young as 11, 10, 11, 12 years old, tearing their ACL, which is, horrible for me. I hate to hear that kind of stuff, but we need to do better. And that was the big driving force behind the whole thing, is psychologically getting these people to understand that, hey, listen, you can come back, but you have to believe yourself. And I started to see the belief factor when you see these athletes that are so phenomenal, do so well, and then all of a sudden be beat up that way, from an injury. It just crushes me. I hate to see it more than anything. I hate when a kid calls me and says, hey man, I did this to this, or their hamstring, or, an ankle sprain or whatever. I hate it. It eats at me inside. What could I have done differently? And I think that's one of the driving forces behind why I got out of therapy, because I always thought that as a second term. You don't go to therapy to, get rid, not to get hurt. You go to therapy to heal yourself, to recover. So what can you do on the front line? And that's what I always want to be, on that front line, to make sure we did everything we could to better that athlete and make sure that they're out there performing at a high level and feeling good. So that was my main driving force of why I got into it. Just seeing that pain and discomfort, mentally with these athletes, feeling that they couldn't get back, especially 18 years ago. I mean, we didn't have the knowledge of the ACL like they do now. You get athletes back. I mean, look at Adrian Peterson. He's back in 7 months, killing it in the NFL. Freak of an athlete. And I don't recommend that to anybody, but that's unheard of. You know what I mean? 20 years ago. And it was kind of a death sentence in the sense of, well, you might get back, you might not. I mean, I could tell you all kind of different graphs and stuff like that they did back then. They aren't as great, that they're not even using now, because these graphs nowadays are so much better for the ACL. So it's just a different time, and trying to get athletes to feel more confident, I think, is one of the keys of why I got into it.
I feel as if we're kind of the front lines when it comes to, injury prevention. And at the same time, we're the guillotine. You know what I mean? Because if you have a strength coach who thinks they know what they're doing, like you said, lets the ego lead them, you could be very well the reason a team is plagued with injury. Or you could be very well the reason a team reaches the championship, because no one got injured all season and everybody peaked at the right time. So I definitely agree with that. So in your professional development, what would be one of your largest adversities you think that you have faced, and how did you overcome that adversity?
Probably the biggest thing was, I'm an introvert by nature. I'm not really an extrovert. I don't like getting out there. I like, staying to myself. When it comes to weekends, I'll be honest with you guys. When I was in college, I never drank. I haven't drank to this day. I think I've had 5 total beers, 5 alcoholic beverages. And I don't care if anybody does. You can do whatever you want. It's your life. But that was just me. Like, I didn't like going out partying. I didn't like doing all that kind of stuff. On Friday nights, I would go home and study film, because I played college basketball. So I go home and study that kind of stuff and do those types of things, So I think one of the hardest things was overcoming that, because working in the private sector, people aren't coming to you, per se, especially at the beginning. You got to go get them. So overcoming that and having that ability to do that. And then the second thing was actually opening up to other coaches. This is probably the key that I can tell you guys, if you take anything from tonight, is networking with everybody and anybody. I'm always an open book. I don't care. You can ask me questions and stuff like that. I might not get back to you right away if I'm busy, but I'll always get back to my people. Networking with people that, other people, professionals in the field. And it doesn't matter if it's a doctor. Like, I talk to doctors and stuff and get their opinions on stuff. Do I take everything they say as, gospel and law? No, but I take what I need out of it and then fit it into the model that I need, or therapist, or other strength and conditioning coaches. Like I said, we were talking about Ron McKeefer. Took many stuff from him. Do I agree with every single thing he does? No. But I think Ron's a great guy, and I think he has the best of heart, and certain things I definitely take. So networking and overcoming that introvert, that shyness, I think was one of the most difficult things to do. I still have it. I'm not going to lie to you. There's still times that, certain things come up and I just don't want to, do it or whatever, but you have to overcome that if you want to be not successful, but successful in helping athletes, not just successful in monetary wise, but helping athletes achieve their level, or your clientele achieve their level of success that they know they can achieve, but you need to maybe give them a little push in the back there to make sure they get to that point.
Okay. You speak about success, right? So how would you define success? And what would make an individual stand out in terms of success in this field?
Success is somebody in this field who does what is right to help that person achieve their success. So if I help you achieve your success, then I'm a successful person. Everybody always puts it by wins and losses. And while that's important in life, trust me, it's very, very important, especially in this field. Because listen, if you're not getting the job done as a strength and conditioning coach, and like you said earlier, Michael here, like guys are always getting hurt and that kind of stuff, you're not gonna be around very long. You're not gonna be around very long at all. You're gonna be canned and stuff. So, but helping people realize where they actually can be successful. Because out of all the athletes that I've worked with, and I've been blessed to work with guys in the NFL, guys that play ball overseas, basketball. I've been very blessed to have a lot of guys or in Division I, from females to males, or Division I scholarships. But my greatest success is when they come back and tell me, hey, Dave, this is what I'm doing now, and I'm happy to do this, whatever it is in their job. A lot of them have careers in the police force. They're excited about that, and that's awesome. They say, yeah, I took a lot of the things that you taught me when I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, and I apply them now. So that's what I see as success. It's when other people are successful. It's not just me. You know what I mean? It's not a big deal about me anymore. I have 2 young daughters, and my wife. They're the most important things in the world. You know what I mean? So my thing, what I really want to accomplish right now, it doesn't really bother me as much, because I want to see them to be successful and see my athletes be successful. So I think that's one of the biggest things when I determine success out of an individual is how many people do they help bring up, to that next level. Did you belittle a person, knock them down, and never help them get back up? Or were you one of those people, that help that person rise? And there's going to be plateaus. There's always going to be plateaus, whatever you do in life. And there's going to be pitfalls. But it's helping that athlete or that individual get to that next level. And that's success to me.
That's some good stuff. It just makes me think about, our personal encounters. And I remember so specifically, standing next to you, especially as of recently. I shadowed with you a couple of years ago. I came back and I was going to do an internship with you before COVID happened. And one thing I always admired about you is if somebody ever came up with a complaint, or somebody ever, had a question as to why they're not able to do this, the right way, or why they're struggling to do this, or whatever the case might have been, you're just straight up with them. You don't really beat around the bush. You don't try to tell them what they want to hear. You just let them know, like, you're not doing it well enough, or you need to do this, or you personally have told me myself plenty of times when I've worked with you. So that's definitely something that I admire about you.
I appreciate it.
And I think that's a big component about what a lot of strength coaches need in terms of getting through to individuals, because you don't need a strength coach who's going to baby, their athletes. And I feel like you tend to see that, you know what I mean?
Yep. You got to be honest. And I think that's one of the keys, for anybody moving forward, whatever field you get into, you just got to be honest. Just tell them. If they're not working hard, you got to tell them. You know what I mean? Life's tough. I think people sometimes sugarcoat it that, it's supposed to be easy and we're supposed to make it easier on everybody. It's not. Life is tough. You're going to get your rear end beaten to the ground many times. And if you can teach a kid how to do that, I'm telling you, you're going to be much better off. And I tell this story to all my people that ever listen, is that I worked with, both sides. I worked with kids in the city, and I worked with kids outside, the city, up in the country, in the coal regions here in Pennsylvania. And the hardest workers and some of the kids that had the toughest time were my city kids. But yet they gave me everything they had. They might not have liked me, and I didn't ask them to like me, but I asked them at least to respect me, just like I respected them. And they gave me everything they had, every single time. Some of them still reach out to me on Facebook or, text or whatever, man, Dave, how you doing? Just out of the blue, just asking me how I'm doing. So that just tells me, you just got to be real with people. They might not like it at the time, but come later on, they all say the same thing. They go, man, you're one tough SOB, but I appreciate what you did for me. It might have taken a little bit of time, but they eventually come around to realize that. And their parents do too. Surprisingly, the majority of parents, not all, but the majority of parents will thank you too at the end of the day. So you just got to be honest.
Just a little side story for you guys. I remember Dave told me a story about how his dad made him walk to school. What was it? Up a hill in the snow, something along those lines. So yeah,
my dad was my dad's old school, man. Old school. We used to walk like 2 miles to school sometimes. Yeah. He was like, you don't need that. You walk. Okay. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate that. Yeah. He was a tough guy. Awesome guy. Yeah. Awesome. My hero, but tough guy. Nothing wrong.
So Dave is absolutely one of the toughest out there. So for you, Dave, what would you tell a young you? What would you tell a young Dave Brixius?
What I would tell, myself would be, you got to keep an open mind. When very early on, I'll be honest with you, and this goes with any profession, you think you know everything. All right, I'll be honest with you. You thought I knew everything, thought I was the smartest man in the world. Over the last 5 to 10 years, guess what? I know jack crap. You know what I mean? Everything's constantly changing. You have to look at things and then apply what you have here and then take it and put it in where it fits and stuff. I remember, when I was, 20 years ago, machines were the thing. Nautilus machines were the big kick. Everybody was into it. I got out of it, as Jamaica will tell you, my gym's no frills. I broke a mold and said, this is going to be on a farm. My gym's in an old chicken coop. We had the sand pit, we had a hill, and we had a field. And that was pretty much it. I had these big tractor tires and all that. And that's what we ran with. I took it and did that. But having an open mind is one of the keys. Taking in everything you possibly can and then fitting what you feel you need to do. Like, prime example here, and this has caught my attention more so in the last maybe 5-8 years, is how many of you guys believe in the RICE treatment? The rest, ice, compression, elevation. How many of you guys believe in that? Go ahead, just raise your hand. How many think that's a great treatment? Okay. So think about this. If I sprain an ankle, okay, why does my ankle swell? Anybody, go ahead, answer. Why does it swell?
Just like the amount of tissue building up, and it's just like a way for your body to kind of like protect itself. It just creates like a barrier. That's from my understanding, at least. Okay,
and partly right. But what else? What heals that body quicker than anything is blood, correct? What goes there is blood. Blood goes to that area quickly. To why? Because your body's smarter than actually. Listen, this brain sometimes, our conscious part of the brain actually ruins the body a lot of times. Our subconscious actually knows what to do most of the time, but we ruin it because we overthink things. But think about this. So if I sprain an ankle and I put ice on it, what does that automatically tell my brain? Shut down, don't heal it, heal it at a slower pace so that I can get back at some point, right? So I had an athlete come into me, and this was about 8 years ago, and I just read over this whole new thing of how to get an athlete back from ankles. And the kid was like, listen, Dave, I can't come in. I sprained my ankle. I said, come on in. Let me try this new treatment we did. Came in on crutches. He goes, I want to go to our football camp, which is 3 days later. And the doctor told me I'm out at least 4 weeks with a sprained ankle. I said, okay. So we worked on it for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, did all kind of different things with movement, compression, and elevation. He walked out there without crutches. 2 days later, he was participating in his team camp. He participated in 95% of that workout. The doctor looked at him and said, what the hell did you do? And all I took was the knowledge of how the human body heals itself. And the number one way is what? Movement. So the old adage when I was in therapy was, if you had a back patient, you told them to lay around. Well, that didn't fix anything. Yes, they didn't have pain, but they weren't moving. So as soon as they get up, they'd hurt. So I look at it differently. And that's what I think you have to have. You have to have an open mind. So instead of RICE, I call it the MEC treatment. All my athletes come in on a MEC treatment, which is movement, elevation, compression. I get the athletes to move. As long as it's not broken or something's not torn, if it's a sprain and stuff, I get them to move. I want them moving, because what that does is it also pushes the swelling, the blood that's going to that area. It pushes that swelling to go back to the heart to get oxygenated and then come back and heal it at a quicker rate. When I turn ice on, it automatically tells my brain to say what? says, all right, slow this process down because they don't want me to heal quickly. So then you put ice on it. Yes, it feels better. But at the end of the day, we're slowing the process down. So if I can get an athlete back from an ankle sprain in a week or 5 days or 2 days compared to 6 weeks and a boot, isn't that what we should do? But many people know that movement's correct, but they won't do it. Why? Because we've been told since 1970 some or 80 some that the Rice treatment was so great. Even though 5 years ago, I don't know if you guys know this, the gentleman who coined the Rice term came out and disproved it. He said he was wrong in the way he treats it. So that's what they're not telling you. And that's what sometimes are the things that you guys have to take up on your own and do your own. I always tell self-education is the greatest thing you have. Not education. Formal education will only get you so far. It gives you a baseline. Self-education actually will make you much, much better and actually raise you up in the field. Trust me when I say that, because that is one of the keys that I found is that self-education and thinking differently. Don't think like, well, okay, if I wrap this guy up in this Teflon tape and, send him out to play, he's going to be fine. No, but think about how the human body works. And then what can you do to make it better? Okay. And I think that's one of the reasons I get athletes back. They come to me all the time asking me about these ankles. And I'm like, all right, come on in, we'll fix it. And in 98% of the cases, I get them back. I had a girl who came in one time, doctor gave her 6 weeks recovery in a boot. We all love those boots. You know what I mean? She came to me. She really wanted to play. So this was on a Friday. The following Thursday, she had her first game. Senior year, she wanted to play. She was going to start. All this, she jacked her ankle off pretty bad. It was a second degree or third degree. We worked on it all day that Friday. She came back to me on Sunday. I worked with her for about a half hour just reviewing. By Monday, she was practicing at 75%. By Tuesday, 85. By Wednesday, she was back to 95. She was cleared to play on Thursday. Now, am I saying I'm a genius? No. All I took was knowledge that somebody else had out there, thought about it, and then applied it to my athletes and actually then had success. And that's what I think you guys need to do is take what you know and say, does that sound correct? If I put ice on a situation in 90% of the cases, is that really doing the job I wanted, or is it just making them feel better? And that's what I think sometimes we get caught up in, therapists and things like that. And that's one of my things why I got also out of therapy was because we're making people feel better, but it wasn't always fixing the problem. And you have to look at where the problem is, and then you have to go and attack and fix it. And that's one of the keys that I always try to stress with my athletes is let's find the problem, and then we can fix what pain you're having or whatever problem you're having.
I just love that point because I just listened to a podcast with Mike Boyle, and he was just saying he was referencing a show. I can't think of it at this moment, but there's like 3 words like you are wrong. The person of the character of the show just couldn't say it. I think it was the Fonz, right? I forget what the show was. But
okay,
anyway.
Happy Days, yeah.
Happy Days, right? Exactly.
Yep, you're right. He couldn't. He could never say it. Yep.
Yeah, he could never say it, but it's like very true in this field and industry, and it's a shame because I feel like if people just admitted that they're wrong, it would ironically attract more individuals to that person to just say like, look, I was wrong, but we're going to improve ourselves and go in a better direction. So like my question for you is, what kind of education would you recommend that people would go to in terms of like improving themselves? Because in our field, it like with the trends that we're seeing with like college strength coaches, they are requiring now a master's degree. So what kind of education would you recommend for younger coaches?
Yeah, you got to look at what field you really want to get into. And I think that's one of the keys. It's I understand that certain fields, like when I was in therapy, all you needed was a 4-year degree. And then towards the end, maybe 15 years ago, then you had a 5-year degree. You got your master's. And now it's a 6-year. I think everybody has a 6-year program. It's a doctor you come out with. So I think you got to find out really what you want, and then you got to go. Like I said, earlier there, self-education is probably the biggest thing that I've ever learned. Going to talk to other individuals was better than any other class I ever sat in. Because most of the people that sit in your class, not at all, but most of them teaching, never worked in the field. Yes, they understand anatomy, physiology, and those kind of things. But a lot of the coaches that I had or teachers that I had never worked in the field. So they didn't know the whole gamut of it. Yes, they taught me the base. But after the base, it was over. I had to go find out what else I needed to get. And that's what I went after then, with the conferences. It was much difficult. Like I said, back then, you had to actually call people or write to them. Email was just coming online, with what was going on with the email. But that's one of the things. So if you're really looking to get into, masters and go on for that college strength coach, then yeah, if that's what they require, I would highly recommend doing that. But you just got to know up front what you're going to entail. Like, you're not going to walk in most likely to this great job where everything's going to be cushion and all this kind of stuff. I've talked to guys in that field, and they put in, probably Ron told you, he probably puts in 15 hours a day. And this is the head strength coach. Imagine when you're coming in interning, or you're one of the assistants, you're probably putting even more. I know a guy who worked at the Baltimore Ravens, and how he got the job was he would show up at 3:00 every morning, okay, before those guys are starting. Some of them would come at 5:30. He'd set the whole place up. He would not leave that facility till sometimes 10:00 at night. So think about that, how much sleep. But he sacrificed himself and knew what he needed. You know what I mean? He went and got his degree, he got his master's and stuff like that. So figure out kind of what you want, and then you can branch it. If you want to go in the private sector, get a bachelor's. What I would recommend is get a bachelor's, go to get your certification, even though that's not, a requirement. If you decide to, go out on your own, if you decide to go with another facility, have somebody hire you, then probably need that. And then just go learn, man. Go learn and take in as much information as possible and find something that you're passionate about. Like Jermichael and I were talking, he's all about the tactical stuff. Go find as much tactical people that are doing that stuff with the fire, the police, the military. Do that stuff. Go talk to them. Find out everything you can, because that kind of education is more valuable than sitting in a classroom. I'm telling you. And I'm not knocking the classroom, but I'm telling you, it is more valuable than you'll ever know. Getting that hands-on knowledge from these people is unreal. I've learned more from them than I ever did in my 4 years of, college. So if you have to go to the Masters, by all means, go do what you have to do. But if you don't, my recommendation is, you guys got all the tools right there in front of you. You got it. You're looking at me right now, that computer. Start looking people up and then reaching out to people. Listen to, like you said, a podcast. That sounds interesting. That guy sounds like an interesting guy. Let me contact him. If he's a good guy, I will put it to you this way. They will reach back out to you. Now, don't expect them the next day, because they're busy. But there's many strength coaches I've reached out to, big time guys. And one of my guys I really, really enjoy is a guy named Cal Dietz. He's at the University of Minnesota. I highly recommend everybody listen to that guy. Phenomenal. Do I agree with everything? No, but he's a phenomenal guy. I contacted him. He got back to me a week later. This is about 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 years ago. We sat down and did a podcast. He talked to me after the podcast was over. It was a 45-minute podcast for another hour and a half out of his time. So that was 2.5, 3 hours we spent just talking. Guy give all that time. Didn't ask for nothing from me. You know what I mean? Another guy that I highly recommend that you look up is a guy named Justin Kavanaugh. He's located down in the DC area, Northern Virginia area. Phenomenal speed guy. Goes down to Jamaica, train guys in the Olympics, NFL guys, all this kind of stuff. These are all guys that I've all met, talked to, sat down with, that have more knowledge and more education than I'd ever learned in a book. And I think that's one of the keys, is getting out there and networking as much as possible to get yourself ahead.
So I appreciate that you brought up Cal Dietz, because this kind of leads me to my next question, because Jermichael actually shared me this video right before your presentation about how you talked about Dak Prescott's injury with his ankle. With Cal Dietz's triphasic model, he has this thing called the sprain ankle model, which he has 5 different positions. How would you have, what's your approach with improving the athlete's ability to strengthen the foot, and how would you have dealt with that scenario of kind of just hopefully not having an injury happen?
Yeah, the foot is one of the keys, and I think we missed the foot. Why? Because it's not looked at. And nobody goes, "Hey, man, you got great looking feet there." I never heard anybody say that. Hey, you got a great legs, you got great back, you got great calf. But nobody's talking about somebody's foot. So I think sometimes we misinterpret it. And the more I look at the foot, the more it plays a huge role in the whole kinetic chain all the way up. Let's be honest. That's the thing that takes the pounding every single freaking second of the day when we're standing, running, jumping, doing whatever. That's taking a pounding. So what are we doing for it? Are we taking care of the foot? Most people don't. Let's be honest. Most people don't do anything for the feet. They throw their Nikes on and then they go to whatever they have to do. But what I look at is, and Cal Dietz is great with that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think he's phenomenal. with how he talks about the foot. We differ a little bit on a couple different things, and I'll explain it here. But how I look at the foot is, I think we move improperly. And this is one of the biggest things that I've gotten over the last 3 to 4 years. And when I go speak at conferences, I talk about it. I'm going to ask you guys this. What would you consider, what age range would be the greatest athlete that you've ever seen? Age range. Just give me a number. Just say, hey, from 20 to 30, whatever. What do you guys think?
Probably not older than 30-ish.
Okay, not older than 30. Okay.
I think the younger the better.
Okay.
Personally.
Okay. What do you say there, Michael?
Oh man, that's a great question. I would probably say like 20 to 26. One of my old high school strength coaches told me, like, by the time you get to 26, you start dying. I don't know. I don't think I agree with that, but for the sake of the conversation, I'll say 20 to 26.
All right, well, that's good. Yeah, I don't think you're dying at 26 yet. But
right. Yeah.
Not very good. That doesn't give us much hope, does it? I'm way past that. I should be dead then. How about if I said age 5 to age 8? Now, see, nobody thinks like that, do they? Why? What happens at age 5 in the United States of America? What happens to kids at age 5?
They start school.
There you go. What is the number one killer, in my opinion, that destroys the human body? Is our sitting. We do it all the time, right? We do it more than we've ever done in any generation. Any generation has destroyed their body more from sitting the way we sit. I mean, look at the comfortable chair I'm in. Hell, it's the worst thing ever, But we've done more damage to the body by sitting. The body was never meant to sit. If that was the key, we'd all have, these nice cushion chairs way back in the day. So you look at 5 to 8 year olds, all right? They tend to have the best because they got their coordination typically by then. They might not be 100%, but their coordination's there. Their speed's starting to come in. Their movement patterns are starting to look very good, okay? They're past that, that stage where they're falling and stuff like that with kids. And then at 5, we start to have them sit. We tell them to shut up and sit down in the class. Don't move. They want to move. Let's be honest. I have, young kids. They want to move. They always want to be constantly on the go. Then you get to 6 years old, and then 7, and then 8. And then all of a sudden the body starts to fall apart. It starts to decode. I call decode itself. So it starts to fall apart. Now, not everybody, but the majority of people. Why? Because we have a society right now that sits for 6, 7, 8 hours of the day in school. We come home. Parents don't let their kids out like they used to, for whatever reason. So they don't go out and run around and free play, which I think is a lost art, free play. And then if they do have practice, that's the hour and a half they have at night. And then that's it. Then they're back playing their video games. Well, they only had an hour and a half of really movement. Yeah, they got up maybe a little bit during school, maybe had recess here and there and came home a little bit. But we're not keeping them active. So that area, that 5 to 8 year old, is when you can develop an athlete incredibly and keep them in a coded pattern of what their natural ability is. So look at the baby. Look how a baby moves, okay, from the moment it grows up. We are so quick as a society to throw advanced skills into everything, right? How many kids do you know that you guys deal with started taking pitching lessons when they were 9, 10, 11 years old, or soccer lessons, individual soccer lessons, or individual basketball? Think about how the human body started. You came out of the womb and you started crying like crazy, all right, which is a good thing. Then you finally decided to pick your head up. Okay, that was one of the things. So you're trying to work your muscles. Then you started to get up, you got into a pattern like you wanted to crawl, but you couldn't crawl yet. Then you got to crawling. Then you got to some standing part, okay? Then you got to finally walking, you got to finally running. Where in there did I say you threw a curveball? Where did I say you kicked a soccer ball with the inside of your foot? Where did I ever say you shot a basketball? But yet we skip that because we think we're so advanced at those things, we don't need to work on them. Yet the parents of today say, well, I got to keep up with the Joneses, and Johnny across the street, he's already, look at it. He's pitching, he's doing curveballs, and he's 12 years old. Great. But it doesn't mean we're fixing this problem. We're actually making it worse. So when we look at that body part, that 5 to 8 year old is a huge stepping stone that needs to make sure that we're developing the athlete the correct way. So if we miss that pattern because of what's happening to them, we're actually destroying the body. We're doing damage to it, and we're not taking care of it. So that greatest athlete right there is that point. All right. So if we can get to that point and we make sure that they're coded the correct way, and then we make sure they continue to be coded, we're going to be much better off. So when I look at things, so the Dak Prescott video is a great example. You can look at it in a couple of different ways. Was he being pulled down? Yes. So he was being tugged in a certain direction. But when I look at that, you have to look at it. If you looked at it there, Michael, you saw his inside ankle bone collapse, as I mentioned in the video. Okay, his inside ankle bone collapse. Every single ACL tear that I've looked at, and I've looked at a ton over the last year, or Achilles tear, all has that inside ankle bone collapse. Now you look at Barry Sanders, Michael Jordan, you look at Simone Biles, people like that are high superstar athletes, and they're injury, what I would call injury resistance. They never had a major injury. Now Jordan did break his foot, but besides that, Jordan played how long? He played, average, I think 78 games a year during the regular season. That's not counting the playoffs. Barry Sanders, the guy never missed. And look at his movement that he did. I mean, you would think the guy would have tore every single ligament in his body the way he moves. Never tore it. You look at AC Green for the Lakers, had the longest stretch ever playing, basketball, most consecutive games. You look at how they move, and we studied this with the group that I'm in over the last 9 to 10 months. They all move a certain way. And then I look at athletes that are good, okay, phenomenal, but then get hurt a lot and are injured with pulled hamstrings and then, ankle injuries and then ACLs. They move a different way. Even though they're great athletes, they start to move a different way. That's not how they moved, though, when they were babies. Their body changed because of what we're doing to it. So if I sit for a long period of time, the development of my body actually changes. All right, the structure of it, in the sense of this becomes tight, this becomes